These are the top 10 Reds that I'm most looking forward or most interested in watching this season and seeing how it progresses and plays out. Okay? I don't think this is the 10 best Reds. I'll say that one last time. These are the 10 players that I think are the most intriguing, interesting players that I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. Now, the hardest part with this is me going to have to remember my list. I do know at number 10 was the new guy. We just brought him over here. People were shouting his name yesterday because he provides depth in the infield, and that is Candelario. Now, the biggest thing with Candelario is trying to make sure that I figure out how to say his first name fast and or appropriately. Jeimer?
I believe that's it.
Jeimer.
I believe that's it.
Jeimer Candelario. Hopefully there's some good reps that come in there during spring training. I can hear announcers say it, and I can just kind of get in the feel of it. But nonetheless, this guy's come over, and we didn't see it coming. Many of us Reds fans, if you would have put a poll out there and said, hey, we're going to sign a free agent that is going to be a multi-year deal, upwards of, $20, $30 million. What do you think that player is going to be? None of us, and maybe I'm wrong on a few, but none of us probably would have suspected it would have been an infielder. Largely because we thought that we wanted a big right-handed bat in the outfield or somebody that was going to provide some pop as a right-handed bat. It turns out it was Candelario. Candelario is a guy that provides this team with some flexibility. I'm interested to see what this guy looks like and how he can produce from both sides of the plate. It's not something that this is a guy that is going to limit the platoon opportunities that exist for someone like himself, because he's not going to be a platoon type of guy. So you don't have to worry about that. We have a lot of those guys on this team. Candelario is not one of them. All right, at number 9, as I sit here and I wait for all the graphics, because there's zero chance I'm going to remember every single one of these, is Will Benson. I said it before, I'll say it again. Will Benson's a guy I could see hovering around the opportunity of being the last guy on the roster in regards to him struggling, to be clear. But I could also see him being an all-star. He is one of the biggest X factors that this team has. Let's face it, when Will Benson was playing well, I don't want to say we took it for granted, but he was a big reason as to why this team made a great push. And whether he can get better defensively, time will tell. But if he could just clean it up, and again, I don't know the defensive metrics right in front of me. I'm sure the fan graphs and the basically all the pie charts and all those things might tell me differently. But when I watch him play outfield, there's times where I think to myself, we could polish that up a little bit. But from the plate, this guy can be dangerous. He gets on base. He's got speed. The biggest thing that I love about this team, that I loved last year, is they have speed. Will Benson has that. So I'm looking forward to see what Will does. I'm hoping it's not a fluke, if you will, of what happened last year.
I don't think it'll be
late
a fluke.
Last year.
I do think it is cool how Will Benson came up and was literally one of the worst players I've ever seen for about, 10 games, 15 games, whatever it was?
Yes.
And then he came back from AAA and literally tore the cover off the baseball. And again, that's a credit to him. And he probably has, in a lot of people's minds, especially a lot of the new fans that are just getting into the Reds like Casey, there's a lot of people that he probably has the number one moment of their lifetime. And again, this is just the people that just have joined the ship. Join the rocket ship that is the new age Cincinnati Reds.
Yep.
When he hit that walk-off, it, again, similar to Ellie, brought something to this city that we have not seen in a very long time. So shout out to my boy, Will Benson.
That he is. And he's an unbelievable personality. You can't not possibly like Will Benson if you just are around him at any point. He fills up the room, if you will, with positivity anytime you're around him. And it's hard not to root for a guy like that. So Godspeed to Will Benson. TJ Friedl coming in at number 8, another big-time X factor, another guy where, again, most of my list consists of, is this guy for real or not? Fraud's a strong term. I don't want to say fraud, but is he fraud or for real? Is there a legitimacy to what TJ Friedl was able to do last year to where now we can just pencil him in? He is our everyday center fielder, going to provide great defense, but more importantly, he's able to hit lefty on lefty, and he also produces at the plate, and he still provides the speed that we continue to talk about. I've said it before. I'll say it a million more times. The center field position is a position that this team, this franchise, has begged for quite some time. I'm hopeful that TJ Friedl is the Julian Edelman of the center field for the Cincinnati Reds, as Edelman was for the Patriots. You never really expected him to be that guy in New England, right? Wes Welker, he can't be better than Wes Welker. Well, I don't know. Turns out he can be.
He might be.
TJ Friedl, everybody's probably suspecting that there's just no chance that he could be one of the best center fielders in all of Major League Baseball. I don't know. But that's the type of stuff that has to happen to get this team in a position and this franchise in a position where they are World Series favorites. You got to hit on some lottery picks. TJ Friedel's one of them.
I mentioned the stat earlier in the week, but I think it's absolutely incredible. This guy had like 550 plate appearances and grounded into 0 double plays. He did not ground into a single double play throughout the entire season. We got guys, and again, I say this with love and I say this with respect. Tyler Stevenson and Jonathan India, I'm pretty sure they combined for like 32 double plays. We got Friedl grounding into 0. That's incredible. Not to mention what he does defensively. Offensively, he's a star. I love this guy. By the way, people don't like the bunt base hit. The bunt base hit is one of the most effective in baseball if you can do it right. TJ Friedel's got that skill down.
TJ Friedl does that anytime. The one thing I realized about TJ Friedl, he's a heady player and he's a smart player. Every time that he felt like he was out of position or he felt like he was a little overmatched with a lefty-on-lefty matchup, I don't know if you noticed this, but he would try and attempt a bunt hit every single time. And he wasn't afraid to bunt with 2 strikes as well, which I think is relatively smart. That seems to be another analytical kind of thing that I might buy into. You know, the teams in the NFL that are starting to go for 2 when they're down by 14 on the first touchdown to give themselves a chance to kick the field goal and win, or tie the game with another 2-point conversion if they fail. I'd be interested to see, at least for those that do bunt, how many more 2-strike bunt attempts do we start to get? You don't have to lay down nearly as good of a bunt on 2 strikes.
Yep.
Not that certainly I played long enough to say this with an absolute fact, but the first time I remember even being in a position where I would bunt with 2 strikes, because it was taboo when I was younger, you know, in Little League and certainly in you know, travel ball, and then when you get to high school, no one ever considered bunting with 2 strikes. And then I got to college, and I think it was my first at bat where I was asked to sacrifice, and I did a terrible job because I didn't get the first 2 down. And sure enough, I get the bunt sign with 2 strikes. And we get done with the game, and I was like, I bunted it right back to the pitcher on the second time, and it worked. I get done after the game, and coach basically said, listen, your job's to bunt in that situation. If you can't get the job done, then you're just out. And never really thought of it like that. But I do think that more and more the realize you become comfortable bunting with 2 strikes, and you actually, believe it or not, at least I became to where there was less pressure that I felt when 2 strikes were occurred, because I knew from a sacrifice perspective, I could genuinely just bunt the ball almost damn near right back to the pitcher, and they would not suspect that I was bunting, and it would work. So anyways, we'll see how much more TJ Friedl decides to bunt with 2 strikes. Hunter Green comes in at 7. It's largely based off the fact that this guy's just he is probably the one that's put on the biggest pedestal around here in regards to the starting rotation of what the expectations are for him coming into the year versus what we might actually get. Again, I've said it. I don't know if this guy really needs to be a frontline guy, but I do need him to be consistent. So I'm interested to see what the injury situation looks like for Hunter Green. If he's able to have, again, I'd say even roughly, what's the average starter probably that goes all year long in Major League Baseball with 28, 29 starts?
Yeah, I went
somewhere in
25.
there?
I just went 25.
25 seems like I was going to say 20. If I can get 20 solid starts out of him, I don't want to say I'm going to be thrilled to death, but I feel like that's progress. So I'm open to that. If they go to the postseason, obviously that's different, but I'm talking about 20 regular season starts.
We can't speculate on speculation, but
we can.
If Hunter Green is unable to, and again, I don't like to use this as a knock on guys because sometimes it isn't their fault, but if he isn't able to stay healthy this year, do we start to change how we view Hunter Green? Because I think we're getting close. We're not there yet. He's very, very young. But if he misses 3 months again this year, I'm starting to get worried.
Can I do something that's fun and entertaining?
I'm starting to get
Sports
concerned. Yeah.
I think that Hunter Green and Joe Burrow are in the same boat.
Yeah.
I think they're in the exact same boat. I think that they're in a position where if they go out and they perform this following year, people are going to go into that next offseason and they're not even going to give it second thought about the injury history either one of those guys have had. If either one of those guys goes into next year and they have some sort of semblance of an injury situation, they will be crowned or they will be talked about as being injury prone. Like it or not, that's a fact. Whether they are injury prone or not, I'm not here to debate that. I'm just saying the perception of those players will be that they're injury prone. So Hunter Green, more importantly, more than anything, the splitter, the new pitches, all of this stuff that I'm hearing. Listen, if he can just – Hunter Green's game is simple. If he's able to locate his fastball and he can just throw a secondary pitch for a strike, I don't give a damn what it is. I don't care what his secondary pitch is. If he can throw it for a strike consistently, and more importantly, the number one thing for him is can he locate his fastball, he will be fine. The issue with Hunter is if he gets behind counts, he doesn't have a secondary pitch he can throw for a strike, and ultimately at the end of the day, you're facing major league hitters, and they're sitting on one pitch, and you don't locate it that well. I don't care how hard he throws it. He can throw it 100 miles an hour. It's going to get hit, and it has gotten hit. So I'm interested to see again. Maybe, just maybe, the new pitches will help, and I'm not downplaying them, and I'm not trying to sit here and suggest that maybe you shouldn't be excited about the new pitches. But more importantly for me is, can the guy stay on the field? Can he locate his fastball? Those are the two things I'd like to see. Can he get ahead of counts, finish guys off with secondary pitches that he's able to throw for strikes consistently? All right. Number 6, Alexis Diaz. Alexis Diaz, I think, is a guy that has come to know in this city as very reliable. Rightfully so. He's an all-star. And he's been consistent, and he's been great. But I'm interested to see if he can do it one more time. And it's not that I'm a hater. It's not that I'm wanting to be Mr. Pessimistic. It's just that I am semi-concerned about a guy that's the vast majority of his success is on pitches that are not strikes. At some point, I'm worried, and I'm not saying I'm right about this. I'm just suggesting this is a little cause for concern. Will the league catch up to him at some point and be able to lay off pitches that aren't strikes? Because if they do, there may be issues. We'll find out, but it's just something to keep an eye on. That's one of the most intriguing things that I'm looking forward to with Alexis Diaz is can he continue to get guys out? And you know what? He might not need to throw for a strike. It might be a situation out there where these guys come up there, they're major league hitters. Some of them, like it or not, they have an ego. They don't want to walk. They're looking to get up there. They're looking to put the ball in play and looking to hit it hard. And if that's the case, maybe they'll continue to swing at the slider, and it just so happens to be a ball, and it just so happens to be unhittable, because if you're going to swing at a slider like Alexis Diaz, it's not a strike, you're not hitting it. And there's a lot of guys that just haven't hit it. So we'll see what Alexis Diaz has. Hand in the air, that's the one I'm concerned about the most. I hope I'm wrong. I genuinely do. But Alexis Diaz, number one guy that I'm semi-concerned about going into the 2024 season.
The last month of the season, he had a 8 ERA. Not good.
Some might say he was tired. I'm trying to defend him.
Some might say he was tired.
I am defending him, actually. I'm not trying to defend him. I am defending him. He was worn down a little bit.
He was. There's no doubt about it. But towards the end of the year, he was not good. And I think that is what I'm most concerned about with Diaz. I think maybe there's a chance he's reached his ceiling, he's reached his peak, and we're going down from there. But I don't know. I think Alexis Diaz has the ability, and at least showed it last year for the first several months of the year, that he is one of the best closers in the National League. I think he can get to that point again. I have doubts. I'm having doubts. I'm having concerns. But as of right now, everything's all good. Everything's all good. I agree with you.
Yeah, I think it's more or less just maybe being worried as a fan than anything. I don't know if there's actually real cause for concern about Alexis Diaz. It's just that when you add up kind of the way in which he gets guys out, again, to be clear, I worry about the ways in which if the league catches up to that or not. All right, at number 5, Frankie Montas. He's a guy that obviously come over from New York, has injury history, which is not the slightest bit of the most relaxing thing to hear when you hear about the Cincinnati Reds and their starting pitchers. They add somebody that has just come off of a shoulder surgery. The biggest thing that's concerning maybe about the injury is that it's a shoulder. You've heard Dr. Krimchek say this before. You've heard other knowledgeable people about rehabbing certain areas that become injured. The shoulder seems to be the one that's the most difficult to come back from. We'll see. Frankie Montas feels excited about it, though. He seems like he's in good spirits. He did get to come back last year and throw an inning. He said that gave him a significant boost in confidence, that he feels like he can still do it. Even though it was one inning, I got the chance to talk to him at Reds Fest. And the other part of this about Frankie is that he's a guy that has pitched at the top of this league before. The ceiling is relatively high for this guy. Now, whether or not he gets there is yet to be determined. But again, most of this list, if you haven't been able to know by now, is based off the idea of what we have and whether we have something or whether we don't. Montas is a guy that has received Cy Young votes. He also, in a weird way, I don't know why this gives me solace. I don't know why this gives me solace, but there's something refreshing about the idea of a guy starting in Oakland, going to New York, struggling in New York, coming to Cincinnati. And Sonny Gray's the reason for it. I'm not suggesting that he's going to have a career and or perform in the way in which Sonny did for this franchise, but there's something there that I have some optimism about. I don't know what it is about Frankie. Maybe it's his overconfidence. Maybe it's just the idea that this guy has had Cy Young votes before. But he's a guy that I have some weird optimism for. There's something. It's just a feeling. I can't tell you why I think Frankie's going to be great. I just have a feeling Frankie's going to be great.
I'm in the same boat as you, where I think his ceiling, the potential that he could hit this season, could be not only all-star caliber, but I think it could be Cy Young caliber. I really do believe, again, in all of this, every single thing I say depends on health, which sucks. I hate saying that. If they're all healthy, they're all good. But a lot of these guys have shown that they can get injured at times. And Frankie Montas is certainly in that category. If Frankie Montas is able to stay healthy, I think with a newfound confidence in himself, he's saying he's going to win 20 games. I got to believe him. I'm going to believe he's winning 20 games. And if that happens, I firmly believe he's going to be he's going to be in the boat for Cy Young. And I think that's cool. I think we have upside on this guy if he stays healthy. If he stays healthy, I'm all in.
All right, number 4. This is where the rubber meets the road, as they say. This is where it starts to get really, really fun, because this next 4 is the future of this franchise. Whether you like it or not, whether you believe in it or not, I'm going to tell you right now, these 4 guys, if they are good major league players, we are going to go on a run. For the next 5-6 years, this franchise is going to be damn good. That's a fact. And it's indisputable. It's undebatable. Noelvi Marte is at number 4 for me. Perhaps the most exciting guy towards the end of the year that you could hang your hat on and say, you know what, I think we got something here, was Noelvi Marte. He looked the part. Some are asking, is he the part? We get to find out. Again, had a little bit of I don't want to say a scare, had an injury situation pop up there in the Dominican League over the winter. He's healthy. He's rested. He's back. What does that ultimately look like? We shall find out. But Noelvi Marte might be the best player on this team.
I agree 1,000,000%. And I think, and again, maybe my stock is too high. He ended the season on a 16-game hitting streak. I think the kid's a superstar. I think he's going to be, and again, this is going to be a take. This is going to be clipped by all the haters out there. I think that Noelvi Marte, when everything's said and done, will be better than Elly De La Cruz. That's how high I'm on Noelvi Marte. That's how wrong I was about him midway through last year when we were talking about bringing him up. I think this kid's a superstar. I think this kid's awesome. If he's able to contribute like he did last year, Reds are going far. Reds will go into the postseason. They're going to win a series.
I hope so.
And Reed kind of brought it up a while ago. There's just so many question marks on this team. So many. There's a million questions on this team. How many answers we will get, I don't know. But if we're able to answer some of these questions, will Noelvi Marte be elite? Will Ellie De La Cruz be able to contribute at a high major league level? If we're able to answer all of these questions this year, I think that is the recipe for success. We're going to go far.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, listen, Jesse Winker is a guy that sticks out maybe the most when we talk about, what do you have, what don't you have, how long do you have to do it before you realize that you can just pencil it in. You know you're going to get this production out of somebody. That's the beautiful thing about, maybe making the case as to why you don't extend guys. I'm all for having the opportunity of having franchise players like this franchise has come to know. Pete Rose, Johnny Benches, Joey Votto. Those types of players are great to have, right? They start in your organization, they finish in your organization. But the more and more you look around, the more and more you ask yourself, what is it really worth the risk? Is it really worth the risk of extending these guys before or do you just get what you get out of them and hopefully you can find a way to replace them? I know that maybe people don't like to hear that, but it just begs the question, because if we asked or we told people 2 seasons ago, who do you want to extend or who do you want to sign long term, you're going to get names like Lodolo, you're going to get names like Ashcraft, you're going to get names like Castellanos without question, you're going to get names like Winker, and for all intents and purposes, those would have probably ended up on the wrong side of the aisle if you're the front office of the Cincinnati Reds. Now, I'm not anti-signing guys by all accounts. If you think you got somebody and you want to lock them up, then I'm all for it. But now, moving into the rest of this list, the question ultimately is going to be asked over the next few years, do we extend these guys? So at number 3, I have CES. CES is a guy that, quite frankly, could take the overall perception of what this lineup looks like and change it dramatically. Dramatically. We've been begging and asking and pleading. Why can't we get a guy that is dangerous at the plate, right-handed hitting, in Great American Ballpark, and hit 40 home runs, 45 home runs? Dare I say 50? I don't want to say 50 because it seems a little preposterous. But CES can have just as big of an impact as the other guys that we're going to talk about on this list moving forward. Now, whether that ultimately ends up happening, I don't know. But I will say there has not been a guy that has had better power potential since I've started watching the Reds from a prospect standpoint than CES. You can go through all the names. I don't care. List them all. CES has legitimate 80-grade power from a scout perspective. He is going to miss-hit baseballs, everybody. He's going to miss-hit baseballs that he doesn't even come close to squaring up. And they are going to find themselves slamming off the wall or barely getting over the wall in Great American Ballpark. That is a fact. From time to time, yeah, the SOB might hit one right over the Toyota Tundra. Now, I had to say that obligatory because over every course of one of these shows, the big man, Mr. Big C, requires me to try to plug a couple things. So now's the time to talk about Toyota Tundra. If perhaps the ball goes over the Toyota Tundra, it's going to come from a guy like CES. And I think he's more than capable of doing it. The question ultimately comes down is he a big league hitter, and will he be productive enough to where he's not a liability more times than not? He's going to hit for power, everybody. I'm going to tell you right now. The question is he going to strike out 250 times?
Yeah, he might do that. But
we'll find out.
Yeah.
And that's exciting.
It is exciting. He struck out 70 times in 63 games. That seems like a lot, but on the plus side, he hit 270. His OBP was a little down, 330. Didn't draw a ton of walks. He had 13 home runs. This is all in 63 games. This is a kid. This is a young guy. And it's part of the thing where you mentioned it for the last name, that should we start locking these guys up? When Tom interviewed Chip Carey on Friday,
yes.
Chip Carey compared the Reds to the Braves, and that you have a young group of guys, and that if you get them early enough, you can create what the Braves have created, and that's not, I can't call it a dynasty, but they've created something amazing in Atlanta. Because of that, I think this is one of the names that you're going to start extending. I think you're going to start extending these guys early. The only one that is going to get a giant, massive contract is Ellie. I think the rest of them right now, if you go out and get them, you can lock these guys up for relatively cheap.
Yeah,
and I think it's a smart play to do.
Relatively cheap is going to be a vague term that's used. I get what you're saying. You're going to say that you're just trying to get these guys at a fair value and or a value in which you feel as if that it's the juice squeeze ratio. It's like anything else in the world. Genuinely, when you pull this onion back a little bit, all it is a risk reward ratio of whether you're going to do something or not do something. And I hate to break it to you, but we do that every single day of our lives. Every single day of our lives. The reason there's speed limits down the highway is because of a risk reward ratio. And that's what this will ultimately come down to from the front office standpoint. Do you like the risk? Is the reward high enough to justify the risk? The Hunter Green contract, the risk-reward ratio was excellent. That's what they're going to try to accomplish. And the question ultimately comes down to is what do they actually believe that these guys are going to become, and can they take on the burden of taking the chance that it might not become that? Simple as that. It's not rocket science, quite honestly. Now, the only pushback that seems to happen that I would have is that more times than not, what are you gaining by the extra years that you could potentially lose out on the years in which you are extending the payment to these guys on the front end of their deals? So if you have team control until they hit arbitration, clearly some of these guys are going to be completely underpaid.
Do you think they should be given guaranteed contracts?
We want to go down that path now? Yeah. Well, it's not about whether or not I think they should get them or not. They've negotiated the fact that they're going to get them, and that's the way it goes. But I got news for you. Guaranteed contracts have been a pretty devastating thing for small market teams in Major League Baseball.
It's happened, sure. It's happened to the Reds.
It's not even a debate. So that's here nor there. All right, CES coming in at number 3. Number 2. Matt McLain.
Matty Ice.
Matt McLain is the most influential player that I felt like last year. Again, we talked about this on the show before. His injury was the dagger. And if he's a guy that's not able to play, I would even argue that he might be just as influential as Elly De La Cruz. Not quite, because Ellie's number 1. Hate to break it to you. We'll talk about him in just a second. But Matt McLain fills a void on this team that, unfortunately, if he does go away or he's not productive or something happens, that's a tough spot to fill. Because of the defensive second base that he's able to play is something in which I don't really think that we've grasped how important that quite frankly is. We should have, because towards the end of the year, hate to go back to that Twins game, but if the Twins game doesn't show you that it's pretty important, I don't know what would. Because if he's gone, what happens? David Bell did mention Candelario. They've even explored the idea of maybe having Candelario play second base. What in the hell does that tell you about how they feel about Jonathan India playing there? It's pretty obvious. Now, I'm not saying that Elly De La Cruz isn't just as influential, but Matt McLain might be the most influential. Maybe. The shortstop and the second base position and center field are the three most important positions on the diamond, in my opinion. I do think that some other people would argue that third base is more important than second base.
The hot corner.
I understand the logic there. I'm not sitting here. We're not going to make a debate out of nothing. But I just think that the middle of your diamond, if you have great players in the middle of your diamond, you are going to have a great team. Not hard. It's not. If you look at any great team, it's not hard to figure out that that's a fact. The catcher position, not on this list, huge X factor. Don't know what we're getting. I'll be honest. It's kind of like Jesus take the wheel. That's how I think about it. I'm hopeful. I'm praying. I do see Jolly in the chat, which was a fantastic play by him during the Daytona 500, a random shout out here in the middle of the top 10. But I've seen better days after the big one. I was listening. I was paying attention, Jolly. Just want you to know. Number 1, Ellie De La Cruz. Nobody.
Chalk.
Nobody. You could call it chalk all you want. Nobody was more influential to their team last year during a certain stretch of baseball than Ellie was the Cincinnati Reds in all of Major League Baseball. Did I watch every single week of every single team this year or last year in Major League Baseball? No. So how could I say that? I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I can. But I know this. When Ellie came up and he did what he ultimately did over that 2 or 3 week stretch, and I get what he did down the stretch. I'm not downplaying that. He wasn't very good for a long period of time there towards the end of the season. I'm not downplaying that. But what I am going to say is I'd rather know that I have the ability to have a guy do what he did over that 2.5, 3 week stretch for my team than to have an average player. I would rather give me the chance to hit the lottery. Because I don't think the ceiling has been even close to tapped yet. But I don't know how low the floor truly is. Now, some will want to make you think that the floor is basically he's going to be playing for the Florence Freedom in 2 years. It's not that. This guy's going to find a way, if he gets on base, to steal bags. This guy's going to be an excellent defender somewhere. Just use your eyes. Watch the game. Look at the athleticism. The guy is an unbelievable specimen. He just is. He's going to find a way to be effective on the baseball field. He's just a young deer right now. He's trying to find his way. The kid is young, but he can be the most impactful player on this team, which is why I have him at number 1. And I think that if you don't think he's genuinely number 1, then I think you're just trying to stretch something that's not true. Because chalk is chalk.
I'm looking at some of the stats now. And again, this is just for you shouldn't even read stats when a guy only plays a quarter of the season, half the season, whatever it was. But the first half he was up. He hit 325, 363 OBP with a 524 slug. He had 16 stolen bases. He had 19 stolen bases with 28 RBIs, a 272 OBP, and a 191 batting average in the second half of the year. He played significantly better on the road than he did at home. And against left-handed pitching, he was, not to be mean, but he was abysmal. He was woeful, atrocious. This is a kid, like Trace said. He's got the power of the most powerful guy in the league. He's got the speed equivalent to Ronald Acuna. He has every tool he's one of the best defenders in the league.
He's like a creative player.
It is.
You remember when you could adjust the sliders there on your own guy, right?
Yeah.
When you start a video game, he legitimately is the creative player. Now, whether or not he ultimately lives up to that hype, but to your point, he has every single attribute that you could possibly want to extend down the line. Ellie has that.
In the movie Moneyball, when the scouts were talking to Billy Beane, very rarely does a player have all 5 tools. Ellie's got them. He's got every single tool in the book. I think the ceiling for Ellie De La Cruz, you legitimately can't see it. You can't see how high the ceiling is for the kid. I think and again, I brought it up on my list, but I think it's important to see what he can do on the field is great. I think what he brought into this city, the excitement, the love for baseball, the passion for the Reds, which, to be quite honest and to be fair, not to shit on my boss, Bob Castellini, but it was lost for a long time. For a couple years there, we were lost. Not only because of what the Castellinis have said, for various other reasons, uncompetitive play, but the magic was gone. He brought it right back in. In one day, Elly De La Cruz brought all that back in. And that says more about him than what he can do on the field. Just everything surrounding him saves baseball in this city. And that's what I love about him.
Yeah, I think that it's safe to say that this season has it's very easy to see both scenarios playing out for the Cincinnati Reds. Whether they, like I said before, and you can say whatever you want, and you can laugh about the notion that they could win 75 games or 72 games. They could also win 100 games. It's absurd to think about. Sometimes I try to figure out if I'm just being the naive fan. Do I have blinders on? Am I sitting here thinking that this team's way better than what the experts are saying or what the projections are saying? I'm not an idiot. Vegas says this team's supposed to win 81 games. I do get a little fearful from the idea that every single person in this city acting like that's an atrocious line. I do get fearful that people are going to be like, take the over. It's guaranteed to hit. Because throughout my gambling life, I've realized that if anytime anybody ever yells and says that this is a guarantee to hit, it damn near never hits. So that's the concern I have. But the excitement I have, more or less, is really from the standpoint that I think that they're hedging their bet too. Because they're trying to figure out if these guys that came up for 2 months that played well, are they really that good of players, or are they caught lightning in a bottle? And, it's not a stray. I'm not trying to say it's a stray by any, but are they Aristides Aquino?
That would be tough. That would break me.
Well, it's a possibility. Let's not sit here and act as Reds fans that it's not a possibility that some of these guys that we think or they looked great aren't going to be below average MLB players. And I'm here to tell you that those players are possible on this list. They are. Almost damn near all of them. That's the scary part. And I'm just keeping it real. I'm just being honest. I could go through every single name and let's do it now. Let's have fun. But I'm just saying, let's not be idiots here. Let's be honest. We don't know what we're going to get out of Tyler Stevenson. I hope he bounces back. I'll say this about Tyler Stevenson. When he first came up and he was in the big leagues, he looked like an MLB hitter. He was patient at the plate. He wasn't antsy by any stretch of the imagination. He looked like he was in control. He hit balls on the backside. He hit the ball where it was pitched. Yeah, he might not have a lot of power, but we don't need to have power from every player. We don't need that. And I hope to God that he doesn't decide that somehow these experts have said, hey, we really need you from a launch angle perspective to make this adjustment and that adjustment to where you can start hitting balls for more power, when in reality, he's spent the last 20 years of his life really perfecting something that isn't what other people want. And that's fine. If he's just a singles and a doubles hitter, by all means. Defensively, I hope he gets better. But that's just one position. CES, we got nothing. We don't know anything. Matt McClain, the guy, as someone would like to point out, he hit 220 in Double-A last year, or 2 years ago. And then last year, he was damn near arguably the best player on this team. Elly De La Cruz, we talked about him at length, et cetera, et cetera. We don't need to do that. But we go to third base, Noel V. Marte. You got Jeimer Candelario, who just came over, who you could argue, out of all the guys that I just named, he's probably the one you could say you could rely on the most. You go into the outfield, you got Spencer Steer, you got Jonathan India trying to figure it out, you got TJ Friedel, who we all never expected in a million years to even possibly be on the team last year. You go into right field, you got Jake Fraley, and you got Will Benson. Your starting pitchers, the guy that threw the most innings on this team last year was a guy that nobody even talks about, in Graham Ashcraft.
Yep.
So all I'm saying is I think this team can win 100 games. But I also think they can win 75. And that's the most beautiful thing. I'm just going to tell you, that is the most beautiful thing that there is about sports sometimes. Last year we came into the season with zero expectations. And it was just a breath of fresh air that this team was interesting enough to keep us all entertained, and they were a joy to watch. They just were. They were fun. They ran the bases. They were young. And the beautiful thing is that I am the one. Now you can say that I'm trying to move the goalposts all you want. And I heard someone the other day say, "Nope, I'm not buying anymore. You can't tell me that I'm lowering expectations. I don't want to hear about if they win 80 games, that's okay." I'm not here to say if they win 80 games, it's okay. I'm just saying it's a possibility. I'm not going to sit here and act as if this franchise, specifically where they're at, is all dependent on what happens this year. I'm excited for the future because we got a lot of depth. We got a lot of guys. No one talks about Blake Dunn. Blake Dunn had a hell of a year last year in the minor leagues. If this was last year and Blake Dunn was a part of the young core from last year, we would be talking about Blake Dunn like we talked about Matt McClain and Ellie and CES, but we're not talking about them anymore. You know why? Because usually when you have great teams and great franchises, you don't have a lot of minor league talk, unless you're a super diehard, yes. But the casual fan could care less about what's going on in the minor leagues. They could give a rat's tail who's doing what in AA. They could care about the big league club. So all I'm saying is, just because of the things that might happen this year, I'm not down and out on this franchise one way or the other. I'm just not. Now, you could say that I'm being a homer. You could say I'm paid by Bob. You could say that I'm too optimistic. I'm none of those things, in my opinion. I'm just trying to be level-headed from the standpoint that if and when we find out which young core we can rely on, which of these guys can we rely on, at that point, your boy here is going to be screaming to the moons about how we need to go out and patch those holes. Go out and spend money or go out and find a way to make some trades with all the depth that you have in the minor leagues to try to build up this young core of people and fill in the holes. Because we don't know what holes might exist right now. And this season, I would like to think we will find that out. Or we'll at least get a pretty damn good idea. The only thing that could wreck this season, in my opinion, one way or the other, is injuries. Because if you have injuries, you're going to be right back in the same boat next offseason. You're going to be talking about, well, if he wouldn't have gotten hurt, he might have had a different year. I just want to know, are they good or not? Is this guy somebody we can rely on in nut-cutting time or not? And if I find out that CES is going to hit 190 with 35 home runs and he's not somebody we can rely on, then you know what? At least we know. The worst thing that you can do in business and the worst thing that you can have in sales as a sales rep is when nobody tells you nothing. I'd rather just say, I hate your product. I think that you sucked. You came in here, you did a presentation, it was horrible. We don't want you anymore. The worst thing that you can get is you go in there, you do a presentation, you leave, and the next thing you know, they're like, oh yeah, it was great. You leave and they start talking behind your back. So, in a way, in a roundabout way, I guess that's all I'm asking for out of this season. Is I want clarity. I want to know what we got. And I'm excited for it. I think some people are going to sit here and say, well, Trace is being negative. He's talking about how these guys are going to suck. I'm not. Because they're not all going to suck. That's the positive thing.
We've seen too much out of all of them at this point. And again, maybe we got lucky, I guess, a little bit. But, like, none of them were bad. None of them. There were stretches for each player, maybe except for Noelvi and Matt McClain, where it was like, okay, they're struggling a little bit. Give them some time. Ellie did it. CES did it. I just think we've seen too much. Aristide, you mentioned Aristides Aquino. You gave him a little warning shot there. I just want to rehash what he did in August of 2019 because he had one good month at the major league level. One good month. In 115 plate appearances, Aquino had 15 home runs, 33 RBIs, hit 320, 391 OBP, and a 70-67 slug. Dude had one of the maybe greatest months of baseball and then tailed off into oblivion. I don't think that's possible for the guys we have up. I don't. I think we've seen so much already that they've cemented themselves, at least, if nothing else, better than Aristides Aquino. And none of them will be certifiable busts. I think they're all going to be competitive. They're all going to be able to play at a high major league level. Will they all be on the Reds for 10 years? No. But I do think for the next couple years here, this window we have, because the window is open, you can't say anything if not, but the window is open. And that's at least for the first time in a long time I'm able to say that since 2020. And yeah, I think one of the biggest things that we're going to be dealing with this year is expectations. You're going to go on stretches where you lose 5 in a row. You're going to lose 6 in a row. It's going to suck. It's not then at that time where you say, all right, this team just doesn't have it. You do have to give them the time that's needed here. Each rookie played at most half a season. At most.
Yep.
So this is a brand new season. Temper your expectations a little bit while still having that in your mind that you can win this NL Central. And I think the number isn't too crazy. I think 88 games, 89 wins.
Yeah.
I think that wins the division. I think it gets you into the postseason.
I would think that that's a fair number, somewhere around 88.
I think so. And if you're able to keep that in your mindset, if you go into this season thinking, all right, we need 88. 88 wins us our division. I think 87, 86 might get you into the postseason.
You know what? I think that the one last thing I want to say about an optimistic viewpoint, if we can, and people might like. I hope I didn't get anybody down and out about the team. I'm extremely excited about what they can be. Is this last year at this exact time? Kevin Newman was basically Jonathan India of this team. And that's a significant upgrade.
100%.
So, when you look at the roster as a whole, you can say whatever you want. I'd rather there be the ceiling of opportunity of how good these guys could ultimately be than know what you got with an aging, middling retread of a major league ball player.
We don't have a bad player offensively on this roster. We don't. Luke Maile, maybe the worst one. Is that fair?
No, I mean, I would say that's a neck and neck race at catcher.
It's very close at catcher. That's fine. I'm just saying, again, people who wanted to ship India to Siberia, shout out Evan. I think those people are now looking at this roster. Say whatever you want about Jonathan India. The guy's better than Kevin Newman, right? He's going to offer you something, at least as a depth player, as a depth role player. You have that now, where you didn't have it last year. We can't rely on every Nick Martini to hit. Is Nick Martini still in the organization? He is, right?
Yeah. He's going to be a part of it. Listen, there's a big debate right now of who's going to take the 26th roster spot, and it's just like I really don't want to have that debate until we make the final cuts. How could you? There's people debating right now of who should be the final roster cut, and it's like, well, I mean, these dudes haven't even really got into spring training. Like, what are we doing? Seriously. If Jose Barrero went, and I know this is hyperbole, this is a stretch, and there goes Trace, Mr. Jose Barrero stand. If he hits 40 home runs in spring training, and I mean literally 40 home runs, are we going to suspect that he's not on the opening day roster? So what are we doing? We're jumping the shark here a little bit. It's like, let's just pump the brakes for a second, let it play out. Stuart Fairchild's a guy that's the backup center fielder right now. And we're arguing over whether or not they should get cut. He should get cut next week because Josh Harrison supposedly just got signed. I'm all for sports talk. I'm all for having fun and having debates, but some stuff's just stupid. Some stuff just makes no sense.
Josh Harrison, final roster spot.
If that happens, I'm going to tell you right now, if Josh Harrison makes the final roster spot, all hell's broken loose, and I will be more than pissed. Nothing against Josh Harrison.
Nothing against Josh Harrison.
I genuinely don't mean nothing against him. It would just be I would be severely disappointed that some of the younger players that we have, some of the guys that I actually think might have okay ceilings, isn't better than an aging good player from a while ago.
Do you think, again, not that we're going to dive into this conversation yet, but if you had to pick one from the pitching side of the roster, would you rather have Fernando Cruz or Buck Farmer?
I'll tell you right now, I'd much rather have Fernando Cruz. But the reality is that Fernando Cruz, to be clear, has options, which means that you have the flexibility and the freedom to be able to send him down to the minor leagues and not lose him. So guess what? You're going to get Fernando Cruz is getting ready to get, no matter what he does this spring, for the most part, if Buck Farmer throws the ball relatively well at all, guess what? You're going down because you're going down because you're the only one that has the option to go down.
Yep.
That's the facts. Fairchild doesn't have any options left.
Damn.
Barrero doesn't have any options left. I get that you're upset about that. By upset, you're laughing over there. We shall see. We shall see. If I'll tell you this right now, if Jose Barrero can figure it out just a little bit, would you rather have Jose Barrero at second base, or would you rather try to run it back with Jonathan India there?
Well, can John? This is hypothetical. Is this not including that Jonathan India could also run it back from his rookie year?
I'm talking defensively.
Well,
there's just only so much a man can handle when the ball's hit 5 feet to the right or left of either guy, of either way, of one person, and the ball, and we're sliding, we're doing spinning backhands, and the ball ends up going to the other side of the person when they're trying to backhand the ball. It's the world's shittiest defense.
Defensively, I've lost the battle on that. India, unfortunately, I love you. You can't play defense. The throw he had in Houston, where he threw a ball from shallow right field, like 9 rows deep into the stands. It's one of the funniest throws I've ever seen in my entire life. I don't know what the thought was. I don't know if it slipped, but that was hilarious. No, and yeah, if Jose Barrero is able to hit, whatever you said, 40 home runs in spring, sure.
It was a joke, but yes.
I would rather have Jose over Jonathan India, yeah.
Well, it's not even about Jose or this. I'm just pointing out, like, let's pump the brakes on who we think should be take the 26th roster spot until we get to where we have to make that decision. I feel like it makes no sense not to make it makes no sense to argue the decision now when there's plenty more of the story to play out.